Okay, welcome everybody to the 182nd MCM Capstone Defense. Welcome our candidate, Ebony Johnson, who is with her supervisor, Professor Mark Stewart, and her second reader, Dr. Alex Sevigny. Today's Capstone Defense will last about an hour. Ebony, you'll have 25 minutes, of which I'll time to make your presentation. And then we'll have 25 minutes of questioning that we can, we'll start off with Professor Stewart, who will ask the first question, and then Dr. Sevigny will ask some questions. I, as chair, will reserve the right to ask questions. If we have time, we will open it up to the assembled audience here to see if they would like to present or to ask any questions of you. Once we're done the questioning, the oral defense, we'll put everybody in a breakout room, and then Professor Stewart and Dr. Sevigny and I will discuss your capstone defense and render a decision about your admission into the MCM Alumni Club. So with that, it's 9:31. You will have 25 minutes, and you are free to start as we speak.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining my capstone presentation. My research project is focused on the intentions, actions, progress made by Canadian publicly listed companies towards fulfilling their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll be using the acronym DE&I. For those who don't know, again, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the presentation. Why is this not going? Okay. Why did I choose this topic? As a Black employee working in the corporate world, I believe there is a greater need for DE&I support in organizations. Many other Black colleagues from either previous employment and now have either told me negative or positive views on DE&I initiatives. And most importantly, the murder of George Floyd in 2020 really sparked a pivotal moment to focus more heavily on DE&I support for Black employees. Oops. The agenda overview for today consists of 9 sections that will further our understanding of the topic at hand, starting off with the background on DE&I and how it's evolved in organizations. Next is my research problem, followed by my research questions. Then we have the methodology of the research. The 5th section is the literature review that explains recent information regarding DE&I. Then I have the interview results along with an analysis. And to tie everything together, we have recommendations and limitations about the topic. Starting off with 3 main ideas of the background of this research. First is the increase of external awareness and attention of DE&I was highlighted through social media and news channels, especially during the COVID-19 lockdown. Many had their attention on different media platforms. This is where it was easy to expose corporate internal diversity issues. Next, we have what I call the DE&I corporate prioritization. As stated previously, the murder of George Floyd in 2020 impacted many organizations, and certain organizations issued statements supporting Black communities, which also created a domino effect, starting off with Ben & Jerry's and later Microsoft, Uber, Cisco, and IBM. Next, we have organizational acknowledgement, as many organizations realized how many social barriers Black employees and other equity-deserving groups go through. And this brought up the question of how genuine are organizations in supporting Black employees. So my research problem consists of 4 elements, starting off with challenges to upward mobility in regards of professional development and mentoring for Black employees. A majority of non-Black counterparts have been perceived to have better supportive relationships with senior leadership. Next, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which revealed issues Black employees had in their organization. For example, the mass resignation, or also known as the Great Resignation in 2021, where millions of people were leaving their jobs around September 2021, because workers were worried about COVID at the time. There was also worker shortages that was, it was blamed on burnout. Even though it was millions of people resigning, African Americans were leaving their jobs due to ongoing systemic glass ceiling. This was also apparent in Canada too, but it wasn't brought up as much. This resignation also included the lack of pay transparency and the core values of companies not aligning with personal values for Black employees. And also there was little to no diverse leadership. This puts into question if there is meaningful progressive change resulting in DE&I initiatives currently. So my research questions consist of two. And my first one is, how and to what extent is DE&I stated as a priority among leading Canadian publicly listed companies? And question two is, how and to what extent do actions of leading public Canadian organizations live up to their stated commitments related to diversity, equity, inclusion in supporting Black employees? So the following, this is recent and current research that were intentionally used spanning from 2020 to 2023. Starting off with scholarly sources, I had access to peer-reviewed academic journals, Public Relations Review, Business Strategy and the Environment, and then International Journal of Strategic Communication. I also use secondary sources to hear from Black Canadians, from the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star. Also, with the organizations that I interviewed, I looked at their CSR reports and their ESG reports. Looking at key literature themes, I will be talking about talent attraction, retention, outcomes, and satisfaction, representation and leadership, which is very important, DE&I as a part of ESG and organizational activities, also the perception of external stakeholders, which is also important, and related implications. And then lastly, DE&I as a part of strategic communications. For the following Canadian organizations, the following Canadian organizations were reviewed and interviewed. I decided to have three sectors for contrast and similarities. First is 4 Canadian banks. We can really see if there is some commonalities among them and differences that present what is working and what is not regarding DE&I practices for Black employees and other equity deserving groups. I believe then there's Canadian retail leaders, which I believe Canadian retail leaders, they don't get as highlighted as much as they should. And so I believe Loblaws and Canadian Tire are 2 major organizations that have been around for some time. And so it's great to see how they're managing internally with DE&I practices. And lastly, for contrast, Canadian public sector organizations, Peel District School Board and Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board they present a great contrast, as there isn't much information about internal DE&I practices for both organizations. So for the research methodology, it was a qualitative approach that focused heavily on interpretation, descriptive information, and most importantly, experience-based. So these are a few of the interview questions that I did ask my interview participants that I feel that were very important. So how does your organization prioritize DE&I? How do DE&I initiatives focus on Black employees? Have you observed positive outcomes in your organization pertaining to DE&I initiatives? Has there been progress on increasing hiring and promoting Black employees? And I feel like the most important one is, are there gaps between how your organization speaks about DE&I and your actual experience as an employee? So this literature review focuses on CSR, which derives from corporate social performance that encapsulates social issues in businesses. Many of my literature reveals social concerns such as internal leadership support for DE&I initiatives and the overall engagement of employees within an organization when it pertains to equity deserving groups. My literature also focuses on common DE&I practices strategies used in stakeholder engagement, and leadership characteristics that drive change. Looking at the theme of talent attraction, retention, outcomes, and satisfaction, it is important to create and maintain inclusive imagery on all organizational platforms, including external websites. The most testing time for any organization can be crisis events or how crisis management is handled. It can reveal not only the resilience of an organization, but the support diverse groups need at the time. Looking at the theme of representation in leadership, these two authors explain the term of attraction, selection, attrition model, which explains how similar people are selected by organizations and dissimilar people are likely to leave these organizations. As a leader, what are ways to create diverse environments for Black employees and other equity deserving groups? Leadership focus for DE&I is not intended to overhaul organizational structures, but to evaluate current DE&I efforts and of implementation. So looking at the theme of DE&I as a part of ESG and organizational activities, ESG reports have become more of a required document for many organizations, as it focuses on promoting health and the well-being and fostering inclusive opportunities and propelling a sustainable future. ESG is also important for external and internal stakeholders as it reveals quantitative information about DE&I practices and the impacts for Black employees. The second theme on this page is the perception of external stakeholders and related implications. Employees have dramatically impacted the views of organizations through their networks with external stakeholders. Often Black stakeholders determine their perception of an organization through current Black employees to inform them. Organizations should adopt stakeholder theory as it enables effective steps for crisis management, minimizes confusion, and reputational damage. And lastly, looking at the theme of DE&I as a part of strategic communication, there are two different strategic communication perspectives that can help advance DE&I initiatives. So one is the meso level, which is a theoretical analysis at an organizational level of practice. And second is the micro level that addresses the application of theories to understand how communication takes place in the strategic context. Organizations need to have a balance of the meso and micro of communication. This will not only enable a better understanding of equity deserving groups, but the entire organization. So just going back to research methodology, I had 8 interviews focused on participants' experience and their perspective on DE&I practices. They were all Black employees ranging from junior, mid-level, and senior level employment. So I had 10 detailed interview questions. I added additional specific questions depending on the organization if the interviewee wanted to explain more about their organization and their experience. I had the snowball sampling method, which was very effective because it was a little bit of a challenge getting more interview participants. So having them connect me with other potential candidates was great. Next, we have the interview results. Okay, so each interviewee has revealed their experience in the organization, and below are a few perspectives that are interesting and also reveal notable discrepancies. We can see that TD and CIBC focus on connectivity for Black employees. More so, CIBC has their Black employee network. TD has their Black Excellent group that focuses on Black employee initiatives. RBC and Scotiabank are still in the process of growing their DE&I initiatives for Black employees, but are not quite there yet. On the other hand, there are organizations such as Dufferin Peel, Catholic School Board, that have not quite updated their inclusion policies since 1993. Next, we have a quick reveal of commonalities within these 8 organizations. the most important statement and intentions here is certain organizations actively presenting DE&I initiatives for Black colleagues, the Black community, and Black customers, which are two organizations that are pursuing this diverse agenda, which is TD and CIBC, according to the experiences of the interviewees. Okay, again, looking at research question 1, interview question 5, which says here, if they perceive that there's a gap between how their organization speaks about DE&I as a priority and their actual experience as an employee. Although these are the interviewees' point of views, there are notable discrepancies between the stated intentions and the observed actions. Some organizations, such as RBC, Canadian Tire, and Loblaws, reveal little to no DE&I priorities and commitment, but Scotiabank and CIBC lack consistency of DE&I initiatives to promote equity-deserving groups across all departments, as it seems dependent on the department the employees are working in. So research question 2 was, how and to what extent do the actions of leading public Canadian organizations live up to the stated commitments related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and supporting Black employees? So again, this is an opinion of the interview participants. So the following organizations, as you can see here on the slide, need to commit more to hiring more Black professionals. C-suite and senior executives need to participate more in DE&I conversations and create mentorship programs for Black employees. And on the other hand, the following organizations are committed to leadership supporting Black employees on career advancement or professional development. CIBC invests time and the advancement of their what they call CBEN, or the Black Employee Network. And then TD committed to investing in all employees through paid courses and career development. So research summary and analysis. Many Black employees continue to face this challenge of thriving and feeling valued in their organization. And Black voices are not being fully heard in spaces or being created. And this was evident in my interview with Canadian Tire, where the interviewee said, Canadian Tire has a long way to go when it comes to implementing DE&I. DE&I programs and principles should be a fundamental element in every organization. Matter of fact, it should be the core. Most organizations interviewed still have remaining barriers in talent attraction and career development of Black employees, especially correlating to where there's no, Black role models higher up. It's hard to look where Black employees can go if they don't see people themselves at those senior levels. Only some organizations such as TD significantly invest in their Black employees and external stakeholders to build connections and relationships in the Black community. And lastly, it shouldn't take the tragedy of George Floyd's murder to only recognize and act upon systemic discrimination that impacts Black employees. So looking here at recommendations, which are so important, we really need leadership. Leadership needs to take responsibility to change the dynamics of visible representation in all levels of employment. We need an effective execution of DE&I plans that result in meaningful and visible improvements to the experience and process of Black employees and other equity-deserving groups as well. And organizations should use many available resources that are I think everyone has access, well, not everyone has access to online, but there is a lot of tools that are being created and updated online that can be used. Execute DE&I initiatives for different equity-deserving groups separately. So a lot of interviewees said that they felt like they were clumped together with other equity-deserving groups, and every group deserves their own platform and their own time to have their voice heard separately. And lastly, consistently promote, hire, and empower qualified Black employees in all levels of employment. It would really, help a strong support for Black employees. And especially if there's a Black employee network, I would love to talk to someone that's in a senior role and looks like me. And lastly, we have the limitations that I went through during this research project. One is the perspective of each interviewee is limited to their individual aspects. And so it was a limited sampling of possible perspectives. Then I have, during the interview process, some targeted Black employees were either too busy with personal or work-related tasks and couldn't participate in the study. So I was only able to get 8 out of 10 targeted respondents for this interview process. And 3, the interviewer, which is me, had possible biased perspectives as a Black employee, preconceived perspectives of DE&I impacts, as a researcher that's in a large corporation. And lastly, the number of organizations assessed is not sufficient to derive a meaningful statistical insight. It's not a quantitative approach, it's more qualitative. Okay, and thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Q&A, what else to say?